Okay, so let's just begin by refreshing ourselves on what synaptic transmission begins to look like. So on my left here we have our presynaptic neuron. Inside of our presynaptic neuron we know that we have synaptic vessels. Inside of these synaptic vessels are something that we refer to as neurotransmitters, which is what chemical messages are sent through. We know that these neurotransmitters pass through the synaptic gap or cleft if you're feeling fancy, and then absorbed into what we refer as the postsynaptic receptor sites. So that's a bit of a refresher on synaptic transmission that we learned in our last biopsych lesson, everyone's favourite lesson of all time. Yesterday you began to read about how the genetic explanation assumes that there is a genetic explanation for OCD. They suggest that OCD has a correlation or an association with very low levels of serotonin. Serotonin is a hormone that is linked to mood regulation, and it's released by certain neurons within our brain. So remember, when we're talking about neurons, this is how neurons send messages or how information is sent, okay? So the specific medication that we are talking about is something called SSRIs, and these aim to target neurons that are beginning to send serotonin throughout the body. And what they want to do is increase serotonin levels within the body. So let's talk a little bit about how they do that. In our synaptic vessels are our neurotransmitters. So for our example, our neurotransmitter is going to be serotonin. We know already that through the process of synaptic transmission, our serotonin neurotransmitters travel through the synaptic gap. And are then reabsorbed into the receptor site in our postsynaptic neuron. Beautiful little diagram drawn by me. However, then what happens is, in a regular synaptic transmission, these would then be absorbed into our postsynaptic neuron and passed on that way. We know that when neurotransmitters are transmitted and absorbed through the receptor sites, that they then either have a positive or negative effect on the neighbouring neuron, which either causes it to fire or not. What SSRIs do is make it so that all the neurotransmitters that have just crossed the synaptic gap begin to convey their chemical message. So they're absorbed into the receptor sites here, and they convey that chemical message to the neighbouring neurons. So it makes it have either a positive or negative effect. But then what happens is that all of the neurotransmitters that were just sent across the synaptic gap are reabsorbed back into our presynaptic gap. And SSRIs are little things that are attached to the synaptic gap like this, that make it so that the neurotransmitters that are sent out across the synaptic cleft then come back and are reabsorbed by our presynaptic nerve. And what this aims to do is to increase serotonin levels, because it's still making this postsynaptic neuron either fire or not, but at the same time these neurotransmitters, which are the chemicals of serotonin in the body, which we know an increase in that can reduce stress and anxiety, which is often correlated with OCD. They can be absorbed back into our presynaptic neuron. They can then go on to be transmitted again to other neighbouring neurons around it. So if this happens across the entire of our neural network, it means that serotonin levels within the body are going to increase according. Okay, so I hope that helps a little bit more on your understanding, and if you do have any questions, please feel free as always to email me. If you would like me to go through it again with you, there is no reason, please just feel free to ask, okay?